I'm seeing the poll question. A lot of people think that designing for flexibility and adaptability, keeping in mind their future needs, designing for that, they cite that as the most challenging. Do you guys want to speak to that really briefly before we move on here?
The other thing you could do, and the other thing you could say is, when we did Locust, we didn't know exactly the size of the bioreactors that we're going to have and the size of the modules. You have to go ahead and look at the spectrum of the equipment that you may be using, and you have to look at where you're going on the tighter level for the equipment sizing and what you're going to get in terms of a yield. We tend to build modular blocks, assuming that we could fit it all in there. The good news about the modular systems is that you can, if you needed to, you can unbutton them and connect them and reconnect and rebuild with the modular systems. So it's not like you have to tear down the wall and rip out chipboard and rip out this, that, and the other thing. You can actually unbutton them, and you can put a new piece of equipment, or you can connect them. When we put the fill system in, the Vanarex system, we actually unbuttoned the whole back of the fill finish room, brought the equipment in, put it back together again like that. I mean, literally, we unbuttoned it. Unbuttoning it took about an hour, and then putting it back together took about another hour. So the entire wall and the two parts of the sides came off. In comes the Vanarex. We closed it all up, and that was it. So flexibility in terms of building, sizing of equipment, and then what are you going to use in terms of a modular approach? That's my piece. Eric, Fred?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think you have to be. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
Yeah, because what I've done is you have to think about what could you do this. What would fit in this space, and look at the things that are conserved. This is definitely an 80-20 rule type of exercise. What's the likelihood of different things? Am I ever going to run the process at 5,000 liters? If that's zero, then I don't need a plan for it. But there's other flexibilities that I may, like if I need that larger capacity, how would I do it? Could I run more rates and a lower ceiling height with smaller bioreactors? That's the type of exercise that you need to go through and look at what's conserved amongst all these scenarios and really design around the conserved parts.
I'm just going to add, I think, as a process architect, we have to always, take into account the worst case scenario as far as the largest, if you look at the largest piece of equipment, I've a good example of that is, I've done a lot of work for Novo Nordisk over the years, and I recently was involved with a pretty sizable facility expansion in Clayton. The front end planning, and one of the challenges we had is they didn't know which isolators they were going to use for their filling line. So they were looking at two or three different manufacturers, all from Europe, and there were some differences in the sizes of the equipment, the footprint. So both in the footprint as well as the height. So we had to basically take the worst case scenario, just to make sure that if they wound up with that largest piece of equipment, it would fit. We have to take err a little bit on the conservative side when we're dealing with designing a space for a particular piece of equipment, but the client hasn't made up their mind yet which vendor they're going to go with. So just keep that in mind, in the initial planning stages, and that will give you a little bit more flexibility and make sure that the equipment is actually going to fit in the space. It's just, I think it's that simple.
Yeah, good tips, guys. Thank you all.